This time of year, you're going to start hearing something that I don't like. I actually kind of resent it a little bit. That Stanley Cup playoff results, it's all random. Hockey's the most random sport there is. There's random puck deflections and random goalie saves or nonsense. It's all random, right? So when I hear how everything in hockey is random and whoever wins the Stanley Cup is just random, it might as well be a coin toss. And I've heard this that they get all these stats, all these numbers, and throw them all these advanced stats, throw them all together, and go, see, it's random. So when you watch an absolutely beautiful play by Sidney Crosby, where the team he's playing on upsets a team that finished higher in the standings, it's not actually Crosby scoring an amazing goal, it's random. So instead of jumping up and cheering, Pittsburgh wins, you should be jumping up and going, oh, I love the random world of hockey. Stupid. But there is something to be said for the fact that the President's Trophy is a problem. So let's get into it. Last year's President's Trophy winners, Nashville. Now, I did everything on the board, and I thought, you know what? I need to look at how far they finished ahead of the rest of the league, because this year that seems to be important. They were 3 points ahead of the team that they lost to in the second round, which was Winnipeg, a team that finished second overall in the NHL. So part of what happens when I see people saying, well, President's Trophy is a curse, President's Trophy, it diminishes the team that finishes first, and I think that understates what they've done, and it kind of goes into that whole random category too. I think it's impressive when a team finishes first. It's also impressive when a team finishes second out of 30 or 31 teams. And so for Winnipeg, they finished second last year, and of course they then lost in the third round. Now your Stanley Cup finalists this past season were the Washington Capitals, who finished sixth overall in the NHL last year. They defeated the finalists, who were Vegas, who were actually number 5 in the NHL last year. So technically, Washington winning was an upset. Technically. 2016-2017, your President's Trophy winners, the Washington Capitals. And they show up on this board a lot. And they don't win a cup when they have the President's Trophy. Spoiler alert. They lost in round 2 to the Pittsburgh Penguins that year, who were number 2 overall. They only finished 7 points ahead of Pittsburgh for first overall. 7 points. Pretty decent spread when you're talking about President's Trophy winners, not the greatest. So your number 2 rated team was your Stanley Cup champion, Pittsburgh Penguins. Number 18 was a finalist, the Nashville Predators. These guys. And that's what I thought was interesting when I was looking at this and where teams finished in the overall standings. A team that finishes outside the top 16 seems to be kind of dangerous come playoff time. 2015-2016, President's Trophy winners, Capitals. They finished 11 points ahead that year. They lost round 2 to the Pittsburgh Penguins, who were number 4 overall in the NHL. So again, while it's an upset, it's not this huge, massive upset. So your Stanley Cup winners are the Pittsburgh Penguins, number 4 ranked team in the entire league. And the finalist that year was San Jose, who were 11th overall. So for teams that are outside the top 10, there is definitely hope. 2 of the last 3 finalists have been teams that finished outside the top 10. One of them outside the top 16. Shouldn't have been there. And this is where we get into that whole argument of, well, we got to have one verse. We got to make this fair. This has to be fair. Keep looking. Watch. 2014-2015, your President's Trophy winners, the New York Rangers. 3 points ahead of everybody else. They lost round 3 to the number 5 overall Tampa Bay Lightning. Stanley Cup winners, Chicago, who were number 7 in the NHL. They defeated the number 5 ranked Tampa Bay Lightning, meaning upset. Unofficially upset, right? Because going into that final, we all kind of knew Chicago was going to win it again. 2013-2014, your President's Trophy winners, the Boston Bruins, who finished 1 point ahead of second place. And President's Trophy doesn't work for Boston at all. It just doesn't. They lost round 2 to the number 9 overall Montreal Canadiens. Ole, ole, ole. Ole. Yeah, so the Canadiens, they actually had a pretty good run that year. And then Stanley Cup winner was LA, who were number 10 in the NHL, and they defeated the number 12 New York Rangers. So both teams not highly rated at the start of the playoffs, not favored to do a whole lot. 2012-2013, your President's Trophy winners, the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, this is a lockout shortened season to 48 games. They finished 5 points ahead of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh lost in the conference finals to the Boston Bruins. That was a 4-game sweep. One of my favorite series in all of history. Honestly, that was a series that made me happy. And I'm sorry to Pittsburgh fans out there, but that felt pretty good considering all of the years when I was, growing up watching hockey and into my early adult years watching Pittsburgh dagger the Bruins when they got the chance. So number one, Chicago, they won the Stanley Cup over the number 5 rated team, which was Boston. 2011-2012, your President's Trophy goes to the Vancouver Canucks. They finished 1 point ahead that year. That was the year I didn't want them to win it because I didn't really think they'd played well enough to win a President's Trophy, and I thought they needed to get knocked down a little bit. They lost to the number 13 overall team in the LA Kings, who would win the Stanley Cup from that number 13 spot. Your finalist was New Jersey, who were the number 8 team in the NHL that year. 2010-2011 President's Trophy winners, Vancouver. They were 10 points ahead that year. Pretty dominant season, but they'd lose, of course, in the finals to the number 7 rated team, the Boston Bruins. So they are the only President's Trophy winners on the board that get to the finals and lose. The only President's Trophy winners to get to the finals and win on the board are the Chicago Blackhawks. So only 2 President's Trophy winners since 2009 have made it as far as the Stanley Cup Finals. 2009-2010, your President's Trophy winners, the Capitals, who had a fantastic year and finished 8 points clear of everybody in the NHL. They lost round 1 to the Montreal Canadiens, who were number 19 in the NHL. That was Jaro Halak's year, and that was an amazing upset. That was just insane, because at the start of these playoffs, it was like, Montreal shouldn't even be here. But it gets better, because the Stanley Cup was won by the Chicago Blackhawks, who were number 3 in the NHL. They defeated the finalists, who were Philadelphia, and were number 18 overall that year. So there were 2 teams in the East that made the playoffs. They would not have made the playoffs in the West. One of them upset your President's Trophy winners, and the other one went to the Stanley Cup Finals. So when I see people talking about, well, this matchup is just, if they had that team, it would be easier. Not always. Sometimes facing teams that are lower down the standings doesn't help you a whole lot. 2008-2009. President's Trophy winners, the San Jose Sharks. They finished 1 point ahead of second overall. They lost in round 1 to the Anaheim Ducks. Anaheim was number 17 overall in the NHL. Isn't this fun? This is three teams on the board that finished outside the top 16. Nashville Predators, Montreal Canadiens, Anaheim Ducks, who ended up doing something significant in the playoffs. Stanley Cup, number 8 overall team, Pittsburgh Penguins. The finalists, the number 3 overall team, the Detroit Red Wings, who were trying for back-to-back cups after winning it in 2008. Now, currently, at the time I'm recording this, March 29th, it's before the games have started on March 29th, Tampa Bay is 19 points clear of the Boston Bruins. The closest you get is the Washington Capitals of 2016 at 11, and the Vancouver Canucks of 2011 at 10 points ahead. These Capitals lost to their nemesis, the Pittsburgh Penguins. These Canucks imploded against the Boston Bruins. And when I see people say, oh, no, it wasn't that bad, yeah, it was. For a 7-game series, it was pretty lopsided in favor of Boston. But I've got a whole book on that right now, so we'll see if that rears its ugly head this summer. Spoiler alert, it will. Now, outside the top 16, the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche right now are not a top 16 team. So does this mean maybe we're due for another team outside of the top 16 in the NHL that lucks out and makes it into the playoffs because of the conference they're in, that we'll see them do something significant in the playoffs? Well, they can't upset the President's Trophy winners unless it's in the Stanley Cup Final. They could get to the Stanley Cup Final and play the President's Trophy winners. Tampa Bay, to me, if we're talking about who could upset Tampa, I think, and this is the most honest answer, themselves. Some of these teams, some of these President's Trophy winners, Boston just, they did themselves in against Montreal. I don't know how else to put it. Vancouver, again, they imploded. And in 2011-2012, they were lucky to win a game against the Kings that year. And I know people are going to say, well, Daniel Sedin was hurt. You know what? No, you're the best team in the league. You're the best team in the league. You should be able to absorb injuries and do well. And they still won first overall in the NHL, they just, in the playoffs, didn't have enough. And even with Daniel Sedin, they don't beat the Kings that year. The Rangers losing to Tampa, this was just an insanely good matchup. This went to 7. The Capitals, again, they had a mental problem against Pittsburgh. It really seemed like Pittsburgh, it was just 90% of this seemed to be that the Capitals just psychologically couldn't deal with Pittsburgh. And that Pittsburgh, they were psyched out before things had even gotten underway. Not to take anything away from Pittsburgh, that's back-to-back Stanley Cups. But Washington didn't help themselves in that. And I think it helped Washington last year that they didn't have that President's Trophy. They didn't have that pressure on them. For Nashville last year, they win the President's Trophy. They lost a very hard-fought series to the Winnipeg Jets. Pekka Rinne not playing like Pekka Rinne. He wasn't just too good right now at that time. And so, Nashville's kind of fallen back down. But look, when they were finalists the year before, they were number 18 overall. So right now, I think they're 10th or 11th overall in the NHL. Maybe that's best for them. Maybe that's that sweet spot, and maybe they can go on a run. I'm not saying Tampa's going to lose in the first round or second round. But there are going to be plenty of people that predict it. I can't see them being out in the first round, but I will say this. President's Trophy winners don't like playing the Montreal Canadiens. They don't. So if it's Tampa and Montreal in the first, and I've said this, and people have said, oh, no, that Montreal couldn't beat Tampa. I think they could. I think they could. And it's not because they're the better team. It's because in a 7-game series, the matchups change. I don't consider hockey to be random. I think the idea that hockey is just random is ridiculous. I think there's a lot of parity. That's why I've shown the point spread between the President's Trophy winner and the teams beneath them, because President's Trophy gets blown up into these big thing. What Tampa's doing this year is really out of sorts. It is not your usual President's Trophy win. But there are enough good teams in the NHL that being first overall just gives you home ice for that 7th game, and it doesn't mean that in a 7-game series against any one team, you will necessarily be better. So, yeah, for me, the whole hockey is random thing, it's nice. All the stats, fantastic. And I know there's huge tables of stats that show how random hockey is. But to me, I think it comes down to heart. And you can't measure that on a graph. You can't measure that on a table. You can't measure the heart of a Scott Hartnell out there. You can't measure Chris Pronger's willingness to do whatever it takes to succeed. I mean, we can debate Chris Pronger's career and the things he did. The guy was a warrior, and he did whatever it took to win. And whatever the league would allow, he did it. So, Scott Stevens as well. Stevens, we can debate how legal his hits would be now. Doesn't matter, they were legal then. And the guy won Stanley Cups. So, that's something you can't measure. That's something you can't just throw on a graph. And that's why I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the randomness of the league. And I also don't pay a whole lot of attention to the President's Trophy curse, because I think there's just too much made of it. But let me know what you guys think. Tampa, juggernaut straight to the Stanley Cup, or no? I can't see them losing in the first round. Montreal would be a tough matchup, I think. Just, again, Montreal tends to overachieve when they're in these situations. And Boston, could Boston get revenge from last year? Maybe. I think Tampa's overdue for a Stanley Cup final appearance again. I think this is a team that can do that. And then it's just a matter of who they're against from the West. So it's a matter of who in the West can stop them. I think San Jose, with some really timely goaltending, could do it. I think Calgary, if their goaltending can hold up, and if their scoring comes back to where it was earlier in the year, they can do it. There are teams that can beat them. But it doesn't take away from what Tampa's done so far this year. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happen upon this video. And no, I don't think hockey's random, because I don't think it's random that Sidney Crosby's won 3 Stanley Cups. Let me know your thoughts on that as well. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.